A pleasant good morning. Welcome all the participants to the day 2 of 5 days short-term Gyan course entitled Advances in Sustainable Distributed Technology in Food Processing. Today, as mentioned in the program schedule, the course instructor, Professor B.K. Tiwari, will be handling lecture 5 to lecture 9. And we would like to bring to your notice that course instructor is really interested to have an interactive session with the participants. So please do feel free to ask your queries by raising the hand so that we'll unmute you and the participants can directly interact with the speaker towards the end of the session. Or please post your questions in the chat box. So moving on to today's morning session, we have the module non-thermal processing technology, its operating principle, mechanism of microbial inactivation, intrinsic and extrinsic processing parameters. Over to you, sir.
What it is telling, sir? You cannot start your video because post has stopped it. Yes, that is so now you are actually.
Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, students, and friends and colleagues. As our organizer already mentioned about the questions, so if you have any questions in between, please feel free to ask, even for either for yesterday's lecture or for today's lecture. And as it was mentioned, we're going to talk about operating principles, mechanisms, and various applications. So you'll see a range of different applications and basics also. And what we will be covering today is basics about ultrasonics, its applications, related mechanisms, and drawing some few conclusions. So we'll continue and we'll take a break in between for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll continue with the ultrasonic part. And I haven't divided this section into point by point as extrinsic and intrinsic factors. It is best way to understand this is when we look into examples, and then if you have any questions why something is affecting, that will solve a lot of problem and it creates clarity. And some of the stuff here, it's not may raise some of those doubts in your mind, and please feel free to ask those. Now, coming with the ultrasonics, so what is basically an ultrasound? Ultrasound is sound whichever is above human hearing range. That is again above 18 kilohertz. So here there's no boundary line which classifies diagnostic ultrasonic or power ultrasonics or for processing applications. So anything about 20 kilohertz will be classified as for processing application up to 20 to 100 kilohertz. And some of those applications are also at 400 kilohertz, 600 kilohertz, as well as at 900 kilohertz. And we also have extended zone up to 2 megahertz. But for diagnostic applications, as what we were mentioning yesterday as non-destructive technique, or for diagnostic purpose, that is above 5 megahertz. So if you look at the frequency sweep and the power, so if you look into any of the scientific literatures, it clearly says how ultrasonics is classified for different applications based on frequencies. So broadly, we have application of ultrasound for diagnostics and processing, and anything at higher is medical imaging, acoustic sensors, acoustic microscopy. And these are basically a low power, high frequency applications. Whereas when we have a high power and low frequency, when I say low frequency, that is about 20 kilohertz and up to 1 megahertz. And some of the applications are also there about above 1 megahertz. So majority of the processing application which are used in research, academic field, as well as for industrial application lies within that particular range. So what are the applications and how it happens? It's ultrasonic leads to either mechanical effect, chemical or biochemical effect. There is one single most important mechanism of ultrasonic that is related to cavitation. That's why I classified that as a cavitation technologies, because cavitation is nothing, is just the formation of cavities, that is bubbles. And these are vapor pressure bubbles. Either they are formed or they collapse. Due to the formation of the bubbles or movement of those bubbles, we get mechanical effect. And if these bubbles, the high pressure bubbles, and it is estimated these bubbles can lead to a localized temperature over 3000 degrees Celsius and plus similar very high pressure within those bubbles, and they implode or explode. When I say implode, that means they collapse inside, or they explode, that means just like a bombardment. Because of that, it causes a lot of biochemical and chemical effect. And based on these different effects, we have range of different applications. So the application of ultrasonics, there are a lot of limitations and there are a lot of specific applications. But if you think at 20 kilohertz, we get increase in, for example, crystallization. That does not mean at 25 kilohertz, you'll have a further increase. No, every effect, every application of ultrasound is having its own cause and effect. So what happens at 20 kilohertz frequency will not happen at 100 kilohertz frequency. And there are ultrasonic equipments which are available, which only operates on a specific frequency. We cannot change or tune a frequency. Some of the equipments can come with the 2 frequencies or 3 frequencies, but that's not worth using it, just because it's very difficult to operate in that range. Now, coming back to ultrasonics basics, what are the key parameters? If you see any of the sound wave, you have a crest and a trough, and the distance between them is a wavelength. So that's the way it's basic ultrasonic or any of the electromagnetic spectrum works. Now, the key important parameter when it comes to food processing application is, one is ultrasonic frequency. So as I already mentioned, between 20 kilohertz frequency and above, they have processing applications or they have extended applications related to frequencies. And another important parameter is amplitude. That means it's related to ultrasonic frequency. And based on the amplitude and the frequency, and third important parameter is ultrasonic power. And this power is calculated by simply by calorimetric method, that is MCP delta T. And that means if you have to measure the power of ultrasound treatment, if you take 100 ml of water, put in an ultrasonic, either a probe-based system as what you'll see in coming slides, or take a bath, ultrasonic bath system, and that 100 ml of water, and you operate it on a specific amplitude or a frequency, then you will see an increase in temperature. And this increase in temperature is dT by dt, that if you differentiate this, or if you fit in a polynomial equation to that, you get equation, and then whatever is in whatever is next to linear variable, that is whatever is next to the time, that slope, that means slope of this line will be dt by dt. And as you would have studied very well under in your undergrad education, so mass is 100, the specific heat of water is 4.18 kilojoules, and dt by dt, that will give you the power. And this has to be calculated. And when it comes to amplitude, this is provided by a manufacturer. This is what we cannot alter. Normally, most of the ultrasonic equipment, they report as 30% amplitude, 100% amplitude. But percentage is a relative unit. So you have to see what 100% represent. In some equipment, for example, 100% represents 61 micrometer. In some cases, 100% means 120 micrometer. So that is the percentage. Even if you see the relationship between amplitude and the power, that will be always relatively a straight line. So that's the way its power is calculated. So 500 watt ultrasonic equipment, that is the nominal power of the equipment, which it is maximally it can operate and draw down the power. But the power given to the product, that is the most important element for any the scale up operation. That particular power will be not more than 120 or 140 watts. The third important criteria here is ultrasonic intensity, that is watt per centimeter square. So if you look at the bath system, if you see the radiating plate at the bottom, the area of that particular plate, if you measure that and the power going in, power whatever is measured, power divided by the area of that plate will give you ultrasonic intensity. Whereas when we have a probe system, the area of the radiating probe, that means the tip of the probe, if you have the area of that, that is suppose it's 19 mm probe, 19 mm dia probe, that means pi d square by 4. So that is just the area equation. Then you can calculate ultrasonic intensity. Third most important unit used in basic food processing application is acoustic energy density. So whatever power you have calculated, and if you're using this power for 1 liter of sample, that means power upon 1 liter will become acoustic energy, that is watt per ml. So these are some of the units which are very important for scale up operations. And this is one of the limiting factor when we look into the literature. Some places given as a percentage without knowing what is 100% of amplitude means. So this adds a bit of clarity, and you can see here change in temperature during ultrasonic processing at varying amplitude. So this is the first exercise what has to be done for an equipment to know how much power it can deliver and what is the power level you obtain from there. And there are other ways of measuring ultrasonic cavitation or ultrasonic energy, because here if you see here for the specific heat of the water is used, whereas if you're using orange juice to treat with ultrasonics, so specific heat of orange juice can be used, but the problem here is specific heat is the values what we obtain, they also have a function of temperature and function of pressure. So here why we use distilled water, just to get a relative energy measurement, because exact energy measurement is quite tedious and there is a possibility of doing it. However, when we look for applications, most of the ultrasonics we try to focus only on an easier way of obtaining energy and relative form of that particular system. So this happens. Other form of it is acoustic energy density is amount of sound energy per unit volume. The advantage of this measure is that you can use it as a guide for scale up. So if you're using it for 1 liter, you need 0.4 watt per ml. So that means for 1000 liter, how much energy is required, and that way we can back calculate it, and then based on that we can use the equipment. So that's one of those simple way of measuring power level. And how it happens, it's all because of cavitation. So cavitation collapse produces sufficient energy to break chemical bonds of water to yield H+ and OH radicals. So as in the previous slide, when I was showing you mechanical effect, chemical and biochemical effect, biochemical and chemical effect are all because of sonolysis of water. So H+ and OH, that means breakdown of the water. So hence it forms hydrogen peroxide. Another way of measuring ultrasonic energy is by measuring the production of OH and H+ radical, and for that we need the electron spin resonance ESR or EPR equipment to measure those free radicals. A. B is to measure hydrogen peroxide content. So that can be done very basically by using a spectrophotometric method to measure amount of hydrogen peroxide is forming as a result of ultrasonic treatment. Now, these are the couple of ways how these energies can be measured. Now, how it operates. So basically, as I said, these are all related to cavitating bubbles, and you may have a lot of questions related to this. And please feel free to ask again to get clarification on this. Now, the whole of the action, as you would have seen in basic ultrasonic or sound waves, how they move with the compression and rarefaction. They move with the compression rarefaction. So here, when it comes to rarefaction, there is a low pressure. And when there is compression, there is high pressure. That means bubbles are together and they separate. So that's the way sound travels. And during that process, we have some of those cavitating bubbles which collapse or they are formed. And because of that, we get intense amount of energy. And when I said about 3000 Kelvin or degree Celsius temperature can be recorded with over 100 megapascals and over pressure is there, the reason behind that is not physical pressure, which can be measured by using a thermometer or so. That pressure and temperature is only measured because amount of energy required to break water. It needs huge amount of energy to break a water molecule. And based on that, we estimate a temperature or a pressure which is generated as a result of ultrasonics. Now, coming back to the dosimetry. Now, if you see over here, this is one of those thermal imaging, what I was mentioning yesterday about distribution of the temperature. And as you can see, when ultrasonic system is running, the temperature is relatively constant. Now, as whatever is brought in, as you can see, the temperature is increasing with increase in ultrasonic, and outside blue one is the chamber of ultrasound, and this was 950 kilohertz frequency system, which was specifically made for some of the application by a Japanese company. And this is one of the way of measuring the temperature distribution, and this is really important if we do have any product inside it. As you would have seen in between, we had dark blue color. That was the sample was added in, and then it was around 20 degree, and the moment it gone in ultrasonic field, the temperature is the similar one. So that's clearly shows how the temperature maps are really important to see whether the system is working properly or not. So other dosimetry applications, as I already mentioned about calorimetrics, this is some of the text written here. That is basically a power from a device is converted into heat, which is dissipated in the medium. So units, ultrasonic intensity, acoustic energy density, or ultrasonic power. And that is one of the reasons most of the ultrasonic, if you're writing a research paper related to that, they are not accepted or they are rejected just because they do not have a correct characterization of the power level. Just reporting ultrasonic power in terms of amplitude percent, 30% or 80% means nothing. 30% of what? So that becomes an important element. So here, dT by dt, rate of change of temperature, and then which can be determined by fitting a temperature change versus data, and then Cp specific heat of the medium. So mainly when we report ultrasonic equipment, we always use a distilled water because specific heat changes as we use different ultrasonic treatment. So best part is to use it as a water, and then M is mass and V is the volume. So based on that, if you do unit balance, you can calculate the power level. So when it comes to chemical dosimetry, so as water dissociates into OH and H plus radical due to cavitation, and then it forms hydrogen peroxide, and this can be measured by using a spectrophotometric method, any of the classical analytical chemistry methods. So this is the two elements that we discussed so far. One is ultrasonics, what are the power level, what are the importance of measuring the temperature, and how we can determine the power. So these are the two important basic operations which has to be carried out before we start looking into ultrasonic application. And this helps reader to understand how much power is used and what way these power can be determined. Remember one thing, if you are using 500 watt equipment, whether it's ultrasonic bath or a probe system, and majority of the research paper will report ultrasonic bath probe is having a better power compared to ultrasonic bath. Yes, it is, just because the radiating plate is having a larger area, so ultrasonic intensity is low when it comes to bath system, whereas when we use a probe system, the area is very low, hence the intensity is high. It is also classified as high intensity or low intensity ultrasonics, high power ultrasound, low power ultrasound, high frequency ultrasound, low frequency ultrasound. There are different ways of the system is classified in ultrasonics. Now, so what is basically a cavitation? So if you look into the cavitation, it's basically the formation of cavities, and this is a negative phenomena when it comes to most of those propellers or different types of pipes. When cavities are formed, it causes wear and tear. And this wear and tear application is mainly used for different ultrasonic applications. Now, there is another form of measuring, obtaining cavitation, that is by using hydrodynamic cavitation. That is basically, I have some of those one or two equipment what was designed for us to obtain cavitation due to dynamics of water bubble. And because of changes in pressure and temperature, and you can see how the phase of cavitating bubbles can form. This is solid, liquid, and vapor. And between pressure and temperature, we can see how different types of cavities can be formed. So if you see pressure and time graph here, vapor and liquid, and then cavitation bubble collapse when the pressure is high, when pressure is low, and the cavitation bubble forms. So formation of bubbles, collapse of bubbles, and movement of these bubbles, these all result in different types of cavitation. And these cavitation can also be generated by using a Venturi type system. And this is one of the working principle of hydrodynamic cavitation using Venturi type. So when we have water coming in with the specific pressure, and then it reduces, the constriction is over here, and if pressure is high, it causes cavitating bubbles. So there are different ways of cavitation can be formed. Although it is a negative when it comes to water propeller or different type of pipe system, whereas we can use it for our advantage here. So just some of the few associated examples, as you can see, it's extraction. It can be used for extraction, mainly for increasing mass transfer of solvent of the targeted compound. Here, cavitating bubbles, they help in dislodgement of the matrix. That means it helps in breakdown of the matrix and helps movement of solvent into the matrix and allow the soluble to solubilize the target compound into the solvent, and then it can be recovered. Fermentation improves substrate transfer, stimulates living tissue, modulate enzyme processes, and this modulation of enzyme processes, again, because ultrasound can have some changes in the proteins, and because of that, enzyme activity improves. A. B, it also helps in dislodgement of substrate and also dislodgement of enzyme molecules, so that it's having a better surface area for mass transfer. And if you're using it for bacteria, lactobacillus or yeast or any of those ones, it also helps in formation of pores on the surface. Because of that, the microorganisms, they perform better, and you'll see in next coming slides. Other heat and mass transfer, it improves heat transfer through acoustic streaming and cavitation. Acoustic streaming means the bubble is formed and it streams, it moves. Because of that movement, we get acoustic streaming. Brining and salting, as I quoted one of the examples yesterday on structural changes, that is because of, again, cavitation and microjets. Preservation, the same process, cavitation, acoustic streaming, microjet. Now, if you look at the benefits here, it improves extraction efficiency. Of course, when we are having a better mass transfer, then we have better extraction efficiencies. So in a solvent, whether it's water or supercritical water or subcritical water, and then helps in production of metabolites, acceleration of fermentation processes, just because it helps in activating enzymes as well as activation of microorganisms. Acceleration of heating and cooling and drying of products, improves salt distribution, and preservation, again, non-contact, high efficiencies it can have for sports inactivation, and also when it helps in preservation, it improves shelf life of the product. So broadly, these are some of the representative examples, but these applications are not only these 5 or 6 applications, but it is also ultrasonic assisted drying, ultrasound assisted frying, cooking, cooling, thawing. The range of different applications are there, but the main mechanism associated with one single word used for this mechanism is cavitation, whether those bubbles are forming, collapsing, or moving. So these are the 3 ways how this all the mechanisms are associated with that. So if we broadly classify ultrasound technology for its application, the mainly processing application, that is shelf life extension, cleaning and disinfection, dried food application, and biofilm eradication. And dried food application, you must be wondering how ultrasonic can be used for dried food applications. And that is mainly associated with airborne acoustics. Majority of the systems, they need liquid as a medium, but a certain ultrasonic system which are designed, which have an application for dried food application as well. Other is extraction is mainly for biotransformation, food waste valorization, or to use it for biorefinery approach. And these applications all are having the common benefit as what was listed out for all the non-thermal technologies. Obviously, if it is able to achieve 5 log reductions for microbial inactivation liquid food, ensure food safety, we are able to improve its shelf life for the quality perspective, or as inactivation of microorganism to improve its shelf life. Since it's cavitating bubbles are there, so thermal impact on nutrients are less, so hence it also retains the biological activity of the compounds. It is one way it's an environment friendly, but it has to be determined, because a lot of time the question is, it uses a power to generate ultrasound, and that is used. So amount of energy used to generate ultrasound and that energy transmitted to the sample or to the product, so that is relatively much efficient. So once we have improvement in processing shelf life or extraction, so that it improves in processing efficiency, and again helps in extraction yield. So all these particular benefits, parameters affecting ultrasonic performance, that all largely depends upon two broadly classified factors. One is extrinsic factor, another one is intrinsic factor. Extrinsic factor mainly listed related to ultrasonic equipment, that is power used or frequency or treatment time used, temperature, pressure, and all those parameters which are associated with the system. Intrinsic parameters are related to the type of sample we use. For example, if you're using extraction of carotenoids from carrot, it's different compared to when you try to extract something from very hard material. For instance, microalgae or macroalgae, they're tough matrix. So it all depends upon the matrix configuration and the presence of target compound within the substance. Same way when it comes to microorganisms, type of bacteria, how resistant they are, how hard is their shell, gram negative or gram positive bacteria. So these all will be classified as intrinsic factor. So intrinsic factor all related to the products, whereas extrinsic is all to do with the system configuration. Now, quickly go into the type of ultrasonic system. So I just try to classify the processing equipment in two different ways. One is ultrasound when it requires medium, that's a liquid medium, or when it requires air as a medium. So liquid medium, we have both probe or horn type, that means a simple probe, or a bath system where the difference in configuration is, here the transducers are placed at the bottom of a tank, and the ultrasonic is passed through this particular liquid media and it is given to the sample. And one thing is very important, in most of the processing application, these vessels are kept directly onto this plate. And that is not a good practice, because this will not provide a proper frequency or proper cavitation, because you're just altering the surface. So similarly, when it comes to the probe enters into the sample and ultrasonics are directly delivered from these probes directly into the sample. So here the sample is treated directly in contact with it. So you can easily classify this is a contact type and this is non-contact type. So here sample, whether it's a vacuum packed or it is sample is sealed in a liquid, sealed in a packet and placed in ultrasonic field. So that's a basic difference between bath system or a probe system. So here I'm not going into the design aspect of these transducers. They can be piezoelectric transducer as well as magneto or restrictive transducer. These are more of engineering and physics side of it. And these two type of probes or transducer design in majority of the food application, ultrasonics, or application in other bioprocessing application like biodiesel production or any other systems, most of the transducers are coming in with piezoelectric transducers. So, and the design aspect of this is done by Sonosys System of Germany, is to have this type of flat probe. This is a flat probe which can be immersed into any type of bath system. So you don't have to worry about how we add it into a bath system. You don't have to buy an ultrasonic bath for that. You can just buy a transducer, and that transducer can be attached to a pipe to get acoustic energy, or this type of probe system can be immersed into any type of water bath system. So if we know what is the frequency required, if you know what is the power required, and these type of transducers can be easily designed for by ultrasonic manufacturers. Now, another application here is, as you can see, as scale-up things are concerned, and this is another ultrasonic bath system, which is having a transducer at the bottom with the capacity of around 50 liters. And you can also have a system which can operate at around 100 liters or 500 liters, depending upon the scale-up operations. And for all these scale-up, what we really need is to know how much power is required to treat a sample. And based on that, scale-up can be easily done. So I might cover these scale up again in on day 3 lecture, where we have synergistic aspect and some other applications. Now, other type of probe system here is for clinical and biological applications are multi-pin probe system. So this multi-pin probe system can be used for 96 well plate for gene transfer, as well as for modification of bacteria, or for having a minor treatment. So this is the normal type of system which is applicable for 2 ml or less than that. Second one comes the batch type. This is the most employed ultrasonic system in a literature for studying and for optimizing the condition for large scale operations. So these are the transducer which is immersed into it's very small image over here. So which is immersed into either a jacketed vessel or it's just a normal if you're not controlling a temperature. And then it goes to up to 1 liter and up to 2 liters. And then once we know, if we need, suppose we need 5 minutes of ultrasonic treatment at the power of 50 watts. So that means if we have to retain that much of energy, then in that way we can control a flow rate of the liquid coming in, and the chamber can be designed according to that size, and then we can have a continuous operations. So that's the way how we scale up. So we cannot directly go on to scale up without optimizing the power level, because if we start scale up over here, as these can be used for more than 1 liter an hour capacity, so that means you have to use huge amount of sample and the number of different parameters, which becomes very difficult to optimize. So these two equipments, what you see over here, the Heisler or Sonics and Meteor, there are a lot of companies, they make these type of equipment. And it is always better to have similar type of manufacturers if you're trying to compare scale-up operations, because the design of transducers and tuning of the transducers, they are very specific to a specific company, and it's very difficult to get that information from them. Now, when it comes to a limitation of this type of system, one is suitability limited for liquid or food immersed in liquid media. So that means you have to have a probe into a liquid. So even it's suppose orange juice or apple juice, you have to immerse a probe into it. And these probes are made up of titanium dioxide. And other one is it needs a liquid media for treatment. So another one is prolonged pitting effect or plus intense cavitation. If you have very high intensity ultrasonic, it may lead to erosion of the probe. So those who are working with the ultrasonic probe system, you would have seen the small pits they are formed at the tip of ultrasonic probe. And that is mainly because of excessive use. But it can be assumed that some of those residues of titanium may be leaching into the samples. But we carried out one of the study where we used number of multiple probes and operated at different conditions and different treatment time. An amount of residues leaving the probe system is minimal. And this is very similar to any wear and tear, what you can see with any of those pumps. Even if you're using a pump to transfer water or a food matrix from one location to another location, So you'll see some of those pitting effect happening, but the residues are minimal. So another form of ultrasonics here is when it requires the air. So this is a flat transducer, and the patent to design this one is with the Spanish company, that is Pusonics. And we obtained this type of transducer from that particular company. And that one here, as you can see, this is again an electronic generator, piezoelectric ceramic one, and this is a transducer, and this is a radiating plate. And this throws the ultrasonic waves in this particular form. So this is an industrial scale ultrasonic air-based medium. And this is very interesting ultrasound equipment which directs all the ultrasonic wave at a specific point. As you can see, the dimension over here is 405 mm. So it is around 40 centimeter distance. And this probe is almost nearly about 50 centimeters. So this is just a design, how it shows how it directs all the ultrasonic waves to a specific point. And this is mainly a non-contact type, and we have been using this particular type of system for drying applications, for dried food ingredients, for inactivation of microorganisms, and also in combination with other technologies to have non-contact type effect. So these are one of the configuration of ultrasonic systems, and it is very difficult to find all these systems together at one place. And I was just trying to clarify how we can use different types of system and different applications. Now, another one when it comes to system is the hybrid technologies, when we can combine that. So first one is ultrasound plus heat. So if we are looking for pasteurization of orange juice, as I mentioned yesterday, it's if you want to pasteurize the juice at 70 degree and not to go for 95 degrees Celsius, we can have ultrasound plus heat. That will be known as thermosonication. That means heat plus ultrasound. So that is basically a thermosonication. When we use ultrasonic probe system or a bath system in a pressure mode, we have manosonication. Mano is pressure and sonication. When ultrasound, heat, and pressure, all three things are used together, that becomes manothermosonication. Other type of combinations are when ultrasound two frequency systems are used. For instance, if you remember this particular ultrasonic figure which I showed yesterday on a brining application, here system was operated based on two probe system and a bath system, and this was operating at a specific frequency, and the two on a probe system, and a sample was placed in it. So, and this is a normal bath system, and these are two probe system. This particular one is a new configuration we just established, operates at 25 kilohertz frequency and 45 kilohertz frequency, and these two probe systems are at 20 kilohertz frequency, and based on that we can use a multiple frequency effect. But in order to arrive to that particular combination of frequencies, we have to do an excessive number of trials to work on the different frequencies and then to have an additive effect. So that is one of the combination of multi-frequency bath plus probe system. Another approach here, as you can see, this is probe plus microwave. And this particular microwave is a domestic microwave which was altered. And that means the bottom plate was revolving plate was removed and it was a flat plate. And this ultrasonic probe was inserted into a chamber, into another vessel which is placed inside this microwave, and we were able to use ultrasonic. The question here is how microwave can be used with ultrasonic probe, which is made up of titanium, which is of metal. So here on our request with engineers of Heisler, who supplies us a lot of ultrasonic equipment, they designed a probe that was made up of PEEK, polyethylene ether ketone. And that is basically can also be known as a plastic type probe, which will transfer the ultrasonic waves, but not made up of metal. So in this case, there were numerous applications it was used, where ultrasound was used for enzyme activation, and then microwave energy was used as a downstream processing. So both the things can be done simultaneously. And even if you can see here, there are two rods over here. In one, there was ultrasonic probe, and other one is for transferring the liquid, and or to have a condenser attached to it to maintain the temperature, which happens because of microwave. Now, once we had this design, and then we obtained another design with ultrasound and a microwave together. This is a really interesting design of a system where you can see the microwave system throws the microwave directly into this ultrasonic vessel, and this vessel is made up of steel, and it's having a transducer at the bottom of the steel plate where ultrasound and microwave can be used simultaneously for extraction as well as processing or liquid food, as a range of different applications. Now here microwaves are going into a steel vessel. The way it's been done, there is a revolving it's revolving blades are there which are made up of Teflon, and the way it revolves, it directs all the microwave to a specific path, and that's a French design. And then we have a chilling unit over here to control the temperature. So this we have tested it mainly for extraction as well as processing a liquid food application. So this equipment is a very crude one, but we find this one as an this 5-liter vessel here, which can be scaled up for 100 liters or 50 liters.
Use the cursor so you can see the cursor.
So as you can see for bath plus a microwave one. So another combination here when you see is ultrasonics with the supercritical fluid extraction. Now here supercritical fluid extraction or subcritical fluid extraction system, which is mainly used when it comes for extraction of non-polar compound. For example, if you want to extract rice bran oil from bran, one of the cleanest technology here is supercritical CO2. That means CO2 is pressurized in a form of liquid. It passes through a sample. It dissolves oil into liquid CO2, and we release the pressure, and liquid CO2 converts into gaseous CO2, and we get our oil. So that's a simple mechanism of supercritical fluid extraction. But when it comes to extraction, that largely depends upon the solubility of liquid CO2 in the target compound. So if we have a mechanism where we can disrupt a matrix while using a liquid CO2 for extraction purpose, so we can improve the process efficiency. So here, if you look into this particular equipment, this was designed by an English company, that's ScienceMed. So this is normal supercritical vessel over here, which can be used without ultrasonic. Whereas over here, this is a vessel where ultrasonic probe is inserted into a chamber, and it operates when this particular chamber contains a sample plus a liquid CO2. At that point of time, we use ultrasonics to disrupt the matrix. Matrix is disrupted, and ultrasonic is having applicability for moving helping solvent to penetrate into the sample and helps in improving extraction efficiency. So if you see these combination of multi-frequency bath systems, probe and microwave, ultrasound plus supercritical, these are the new ways of using it. And in literature, if we use ultrasound plus heat, that is quite easy. So that means if we have ultrasonic in a jacketed beaker or a jacketed vessels, where we can control a temperature of a vessel, desired temperature we need, that becomes thermosonication. Applications are for food preservation as well as extraction one. Or even if you are using ultrasonic for continuous time, for longer duration of time, for improving enzymatic performance, and then you need to have high temperature to inactivate those enzymes for downstream processing. There we can use it. Ultrasound plus pressure, that means if we include a pressurized chamber, very similar to of this supercritical over here, this particular vessel can have a pressure of up to 100 to 200 megapascals, which is very close to again type of high pressure equipment. However, the seals and safety of this equipment has to be ascertained. So this requires clear professionals to design such equipment. Now, another combination what you see here is sorry. So another combination what you see here is airborne acoustic combination. So here airborne acoustic, as it throws the sound waves onto the sample, which can be used for drying applications, for defoaming and other element. Here we combine this particular airborne acoustic with the plasma as well as ozone sources, and some of the examples I'll be presenting it in next hour or so related to ultrasound plus plasma, and some of those examples in later half of the day, then maybe in afternoon when we cover the plasma side of it. Here again, the combination is attached where we can use steam with airborne acoustics, can come in as a sonar steam for decontamination, because steam travels in a straight path. And then if you have to inject that steam onto the surface, either you have to directly point it towards the surface, which can cause a localized effect. Whereas if steam is running parallel and we have acoustic pressure from the top, it throws that steam onto the surface. Same thing applies to the plasma. And because of that, we have used this application mainly for dislodgement of biofilms and treating those biofilms by using plasma or ozone or different systems. So this is of high system is mainly can be classified as a synergistic effect, that is combination of different technologies, and these combinations are mainly having a joint operations, and these joint operations are mainly based on taking the best part of A technology and best part of B technology to solve our larger question. So now coming back to the mechanism, as I was mentioning, if you see, this is an ultrasonic probe, and these are the tiny bubbles. These are known as cavitating bubbles, and these are the cavitating bubbles which are thrown into the liquid medium, and these are the bubbles which are either formed and collapse. Due to this action, we get all the cavitation, as you can see from this very short video over here. And this is the probe, and we have small amount of black powder added to that. And then the moment we turn on ultrasonics, and you can see the formation. This is very loud one, so I just closed the volume here. So when you turn on the ultrasonic system, now, as you can see, these tiny white bubbles, these are all cavitating bubbles. This is such a dynamic process where these bubbles are forming and collapsing. And because of that, we get huge amount of agitation or acoustic streaming. And then, as you can see, this particular diagram on top, here, this is a cavitating bubble. This is forming and collapsing. Because of that, it causes impact on the matrix. So this bubble collapses, and then it leads to formation of either microjets, as you can see here, or acoustic streaming. When these bubbles, they migrate and they move. Microstreaming, bubble decreases in size, leading to implosion, that is implode because of its own pressure, and microstreaming, bubble increases in size. So these are also characterized extensively in a lot of ultrasonic physicists as well as manufacture of equipment, and measurement of these cavitating bubbles, migration of these cavitating bubbles, that requires a specialized tools and high-speed cameras to capture those bubbles, and that has been already well defined. The main focus over here is how they operate and what causes their what are the mechanisms associated with that. Now, when we operate any ultrasound, so first and foremost is a direct field pressure. That is a sound wave fundamental to a frequency. That is again compression, rarefaction, as what I showed, compression and rarefaction. because, and this leads to oxidation. So if we have a substrate which is having a particle and it just sound wave travels, nothing happens to particles. And this is because of direct field pressure. And second one is stable cavitation pressure. That means cavitating bubbles are formed and they're just moving around. They're just moving around, that causes micro streaming. And because of that, this leads to movement of the particle. Second action over here is transient cavitation pressure, where bubble implodes. And because of that implosion of the bubbles, it causes jetting, formation of jets, formation of jets and formation of shock waves. And because of that, it causes it causes the breakdown and damages. And these are the two different mechanisms of cavitation, of removal of particles as well as damages to the surface. Now, here you have to remember one single most application here is, single most mechanism is cavitation. Because of cavitation, it forms formation of pores onto the surface, and that known as sonoporation. And because of these cavitation can be stable cavitation or transient cavitation, together with microstreaming, macrostreaming, jetting, shock waves, and acoustic streaming, we come up with the mechanism of ultrasonic, which is fundamental to almost all the applications. Now, if you see this particular very specific diagram over here, these are viable cells. We have ultrasound treatment given, and it causes cells with the pores. So there will be pores formed on the cells. This can be easily visualized on scanning electron microscopy, and these cells can recover. So that's why sometimes when we see in the literature, when ultrasound is used for food preservation purposes, it is reported that ultrasound was used and the shelf life of the product wasn't high enough. It's just because it did not kill the cells, whereas it caused the formation of pores, which led to the recovery of the cells. So that is very, very important to know what condition we are using, whether cells are recovering or not. And when it comes to recovery of cell, it can be cell which are not dead, but they cannot grow further. A. B. Cell, they are not listed on viable, but not culturable, because if you're using a plate count method or so, and you see the cells are there and they're not growing, and we count it as an inactivation, but that's not a real inactivation. Whereas when ultrasound treatment is given at a higher intensity, it leads to further damage of the cell membrane and leakage of cellular content, leads to cell lysis. So in order to better understand this process, you have to look at this particular slide here, and any of those lethal effect of ultrasound on microorganisms is being known for ages. That means ultrasound can kill a cell. But if we control the ultrasonic intensity and the pore size onto a cell, it can be used for modulating the cells, A. B, it can also help in causing a pores on the cellular membrane and leading to the transfer of certain material into the cells. One of our PhD research, which is working on a cancer research, is was mainly to use ultrasound to cause a pores onto a tumor cells, and then to deliver those reactive species or gold nanoparticle inside the cell, so that we can kill those tumors. Now, here the trick is, because most of the cells, when they grow, the outer part is a fresh one and inner part is solid. Like a tree, when it grows, outer wood is soft and the core is harder. Whereas when it comes to tumors, the tumor outer shell is very hard and the live cells, which has to be killed, is in the core. So in order to kill the core of the cell, we have to have a pores formation. And there are a lot of anti-cancer drugs are available, but the problem is the delivery of the drug into the cell. So there, the cavitating bubbles, cavitation plays a very, very important role. And we have certain breakthrough in that for using, working with the guys in biological research to cause pore formation and leads to killing of or death of those cells. Now, so application is not only restricted to bioprocessing, but also for biomedical and biochemical effect. As I said, it needs a joint effort to working on the dynamics of the cell and how we can cause a pore. Now, if you see at this particular diagram over here, and you'll see in next couple of slides as well. Now, this is a clear example where we use ultrasonic frequencies of 20, 45, 130, 950, and also other frequencies on a normal lactobacillus cell, and its growth was monitored at by measuring optical density. And if you see the red line over here, when it was treated with 20 kilohertz frequency, we did not see any growth up to 10 hours. That means lag phase was increased, but after that, the specific growth rate was very high compared to the normal cells. So if we look into normal food safety perspective, it can be seen that after treatment, we have no microbial cells, but after some time it grows faster. So this was the positive effect which we controlled the modulated with the power. It's not only the frequency here, but also with the power and the cavitation. That means we can use this technology, a technique for fermentation applications. And a lot has been already been well established when it comes to ultrasonic for fermentation experiment. So with this, by doing so, and then it was also led to another study to see whether we are having any of those genetic effect or phenotypic effect. That means once the cells, that is single cells, were treated with ultrasound at different frequencies, we went and looked into the genomic profiling and phenotypic profiling of these cells and how it affects the genotypic or phenotypic and some of those applications. What we'll do is we'll take maybe 15 minutes break and we'll come back and continue with this. So far, whatever I know, it's been a lot of information has been given here so far on ultrasonic, on microorganisms, as well as how it works. And we'll continue with this in after 15 minutes. And in meanwhile, if you have any of those doubts, please feel free to list it out and we can address those. So we'll come back at 11:15 and we'll continue with the cavitation. Thank you. So welcome back. So just now we looked into some of those we stopped at this particular growth curve and how this lag phase can be increased. And after that treatment, we see increase in specific growth rate. And that this particular function was related to the frequency, and all these frequencies, there are power. And this is one of the study which has been published in Nature Scientific Report. And I will, at some point, I will just get some of the links where you can get the details of these studies and which are really useful as far as application is concerned. And then I stopped at the point when I mentioned about looking to genomic profiling and phenomic profiling, whether we are able to, or is there any change in genomics or phenotypic behavior of those cells. So that was done basically by using specific equipment. And then once we had that particular behavior, how it is utilizing different to the nutrients, and is there any change in metabolic pathway which is leading to its microbial performance, changes in microbial performance. And obviously I'm not a molecular microbiologist. However, the main crux of the finding was that there are different reactions are there. That means different reactions and how a bacterial cells, they process carbohydrates, carboxylic acid, different glycolytic pathway of the glycolysis, electron transport chain, or Krebs cycle, what we have studied in biochemistry. And these all chains were affected based on different frequencies. As you can see from the heat map, where we had activity, higher activity and lower activity for different changes compared to control. So in some cases, some frequency we had no effect. In some cases, we had very high activity when it comes to 20 kilohertz, whereas in same treatment, we had very low activity compared to control. So these all were estimated by using FSTA files, that is genomic sequencing, which is available already, and to know the genomic sequence of the bacteria which was used. But in order to do that, it has to be a single cell analysis. That means you have to have single bacterial cells, because to avoid cell-to-cell variations. And then to look into different reaction pathways, that is glycolysis is there, PP pathway is there, and the utilization of glucose, lipid oxidation. Whatever happens in a biochemical metabolism in humans, same way metabolism happens into the cells, and in order to see the phenotypic effect. But what was found in genomic sequencing, there was no changes in the DNA of the cells, whereas the phenotypic behavior, that means how different nutrients are utilized as a result of ultrasound, was seen. And that's was the comprehensive analysis was carried out on single bacteria, that was Lactobacillus sakei. And that can be done for a range of different bacteria, but it's a research in itself. So coming back to the main mechanism associated with this, and if you remember when I was talking about the main mechanism of ultrasound when it comes to food safety or on microorganisms, it was all to vegetative cells and spores, and how ultrasonic can affect and what thermal can do. So if we have the target is on spores, so if we have heat plus ultrasound, we can reduce the thermal impact by combining this one with ultrasonics. So the mechanism associated mainly with ultrasonic cavitation is by push-pull and jetting effect. As you can see, this is a peptidoglycan layer of bacterial cells. And then these are cavitating bubbles. Because of this cavitating bubble, these bubbles, they try to push or pull inside the bacterial cells because of jetting and also because of microstreaming. And then these cavitating bubbles can go into the cellular membrane, and depending upon the frequencies and their ability to cause chemical and biochemical effect, it induces these changes. And these are the theoretical explanation how these cavitating bubbles, they affect bacterial cells. Obviously, that largely depends upon the type of bacteria. Gram-positive, they have different behavior compared to gram-negative. The tougher membranes, they have different efficacies, and moreover, the medium where these bacterial cells or any type of cancer cells are present. So if you see the phenotypic and metabolic effect on lactobacillus, that is again, which one were more active, less active, and percentage of activity, that behavior was different for control and different frequencies. And metabolic activity, how they're utilizing carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. These are different nutrient sources which were provided to the cell subjected to ultrasonic treatment, and their behavior was seen differently. So this was all the in-depth analysis on phenotypic and metabolic effect. Now, if you look at this particular cryo-SEM images of Lactobacillus sakei, the live cell over here looks very smooth and having no pores or anything on them. And second one, B, over here, you can see this is a sample which was treated with the controlled 20 kilohertz frequency. You can see the tiny pores on the surface. I'll just take a pointer. You can see the tiny pores on the surface over here. Oh, 1 second. Oops. So just 1 second. Yeah, you can see tiny. Oops, sorry, I'm just give me 1 second. Yeah, you can see the tiny pores on these surfaces, and because of these pores, these bacteria were performing differently. And when we change the intensity level, we can see some of these cracks and the pores on the surface. Still, in B and C condition, these cells can recover and can grow at much faster rate. because when we have a tiny pores, most of the cells, they perform how the substrate can go into the cell and how the waste end product of the cell can cell metabolism can come out of those cells. That dictates how the cell will perform. Another thing is when we add any bacterial culture to a medium, say for example, if you're making a yogurt and if you add lactobacillus culture into it, it is added just 1 ml, for instance, is added into 1 liter of milk, and you wait it for a day for it to grow into yogurt. And if it is done in ultrasonic field, it not only helps in distribution of the cells, that is dislodgement of the cells to distribute evenly into the surface, and it improves the fermentation rate. That's one example. I remember very well, maybe around 15 years ago, there was a study which was carried out to show that where an ultrasound bath system was used to inactivate microorganism in a particular juice matrix, and it was observed after certain amount of ultrasonic treatment, the microbe content of the juice sample was increased rather than decreased. The reason behind that was the microorganisms which were localized to certain places, when ultrasound was used, that not only led to its growth because of acoustic cavitation, but it also happened because it helps in dislodgement of the bacterial cells to distribute around the surface. So that was, again, if we have, for example, if we have say for instance, you have apples or any of the fruit which is having microorganisms on the surface. If it is used for in ultrasonic bath, and then that particular microorganism can be dislodged from the surface of the fruit and can go into the liquid media, and that liquid media can contaminate other things. So it has to be understood what is the mechanism. That's why I keep stressing since yesterday. If we know the exact mechanism, we can use those conditions according to our own requirement. Now, when you look at the D diagram over here, this is excessive amount of energy used, which led to the rupture of the cellular membrane and leakage of cellular content. And this is the condition where the cell is dead. So when we do microbial inactivation studies related to any technology, it is very important also not only to know number of cells which are inactivated, but also to know number of cells which are active but not culturable, or cells which are non-culturable but still active. The different terminologies, and microbiologists are very well aware of these terminologies. That only determines whether we are giving a sublethal effect, lethal effect, or we have a combination of both, because some cells will be completely killed, some cells will be still active, and then those active cells can regrow further given the condition. So this is why it is very important to understand the complete action on microorganisms. So here with this explanation, we can see how ultrasound can be used not only for modulating the bacterial performance, but also for modulation of or inactivation of those cells. Sorry. Just apologies, there is some small technical glitch here. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Just give me 1 second. Apologies. Just there seems to be some glitch here. No, so after looking at the food safety side of it, or action of ultrasonic on microorganisms, next one is again on biochemical changes. And I'm not going to go great detail into how ultrasound affects protein, lipids, and micronutrients and and other nutrients, microorganisms just explained in depth. It's mainly related to cell membrane disruption. Whereas when it comes to proteins and lipids, it's all related to proteolysis, oxidation, and also formation of Maillard reaction products in combination with the sugars present in a food matrix, or lipolysis again and oxidation. So this is what I explained yesterday as a general pro forma for almost all the technologies. Same thing applies here. Protein is subjected to mainly oxidation. If it is in a food matrix system, it's having a less effect compared to when it is in standard solution. That means if you have to modify the protein properties, in some cases, if you give treatment to soya protein, we may see a better gelling properties. And when we use it for fish protein, we may have a different gelling property in a similar condition. That largely depends upon type of the proteins. And obviously on ultrasonic parameters, denaturation, aggregations, or proteolysis. Similarly, is for the lipids. When ultrasonic is used for extraction of oil, for instance, when we're showing supercritical fluid extraction and oil extraction, we did not see any lipid oxidation or lipolysis. Whereas when we give only treatment of ultrasound to oil, it can lead to lipolysis depending upon the presence of other lipid, other water fraction or other compound. So it is again similarly quite complex mechanism. So it has to be, if we have to really see the effect, we have to see the ultrasonic effect on individual pure molecules of protein, lipids, or different bioactives, and also in a food matrix. This will work very similar to microbial inactivation. Microbial inactivation in model food solutions is very high compared to food matrices. So that's is mainly about the mechanism of action when it comes to biochemical effect. And there's no point in repeating that again here, because we've already discussed this yesterday. Now, if you see some of those applications related to ultrasonics, and here I'll have both, some of the applications here will be in combination with the plasma. And it was, and it is difficult to segregate those two together, but you'll know about the plasma in afternoon. But this is one of the lab which contains almost all the plasma equipment and airborne acoustic equipment, what you can see over here. This is having a plastic vessel around it that's in a cone, and there's a flat probe which is used for a range of different applications. And these are some of our researchers who've been working on biofilm application, dried food ingredient, and also on cancer research. So that's is ongoing work related to ultrasonics for different biological applications. Now we start, I talked a lot about processing applications and a probe-based and bath-based system. This is another technique, what I mentioned briefly earlier on airborne acoustics. If you see the airborne acoustic system in a previous slide over here, as you can see the cone and a flat probe, which is 40 centimeter wide probe, and the length itself is around 40 centimeters, quite big system. And so this particular probe sounds something like this, flat probe. Now, what are their applications? So we know this transmits the ultrasonic waves in air. So it can be used not only for process intensification, but also for non-contact microbial inactivation. How? First and foremost application here is, which has been established in a dairy industry for defoaming application. In defoaming applications, so here, as you can see, when milk is added into a large vessel and is heated, it leads to foam formation. So it's very similar like when we boil a milk at home. What happens, we see it boils and comes up. And if you do not observe, it just spills over the vessel. Now, if we have this one particular airborne acoustic system, placed on top of the tank, it is revolving around, it helps in defoaming. That means it suppresses the foam. So other defoaming applications are adding anti-defoaming agents, but here you're adding something to the product, which is obviously will undergo different types of regulations. Whereas here, when airborne acoustic is used, here there's no industry there's no regulatory hurdle. We are just suppressing the foam something by ultrasonic waves. It's very similar when you're boiling a milk and you just blow air from your mouth to suppress the foam. Very similar fashion it is done with airborne acoustics here. And how practical it is, and this is an industrial setup which is being used. And now another application related to this airborne acoustic is also in carbonated beverage. When you see the figure on top over here with the beverages like carbonated beverages, when they are filled in a bottle line, what happens? It generates a foam. Because of foam, there is losses of up to 1 to 2% of that particular drink. Now, how we can control that is by using airborne acoustics here. When it is filling in, and then airborne acoustic, it suppresses those foam and avoids the particular losses. So think if we are having even 1% loss and you're processing 1,000 liters in an hour, so that means 1% itself will be around 10 liters of loss. So that's the way we can suppress the foam. So this was the original application, which is currently in use in industry by using airborne acoustic systems. And these type of systems are capable of running continuously for non-stop continuous operation. And this particular electron generator of this airborne acoustic system is nearly about 70 kg. So you can imagine how and where it can be easily used. Now, so these are some of the listed applications, and we worked for last 5 years on airborne acoustics and different applications, and also for drying of food products. Sorry, just I should not be using this pointer. I mean, just okay. Now, as I showed you this particular diagram over here, so piezoelectric assembly, this is a radiating plate, and this is an acoustic field and a focus area with the sound pressure of around 167 to 170 decibels over here at 405 mm. And this is 10 by 10 centimeters square, which is localizing the sound pressure, which was measured obviously with the hydrophone. And then we had acoustic transducer. And how we used it for microbial inactivation here was one, by having a by having a plasma jet coming from the side and leaving the reactive species within that, and then airborne acoustics suppressing those reactive species onto the product. This is very important. Even if we are using only a plasma or ozone in a product, it has to be diffused through the product. Whereas when we are looking for surface decontamination, whether it's a dried ingredients or a food contact surfaces, the combination of plasma, ozone, or any of those gases, even of the steam, together with ultrasound, making a precise engineering and application, combining these two together, we can have a desired effect. So here we specifically picked two different stuff. One was a black pepper, and other one was a tapioca starch. This is one of the example, but we have numerous examples to quote over here. Why specifically black pepper? Because if you see, the black pepper is used as a spices and condiment, and even just sprayed onto a product. And think of a situation when black pepper contains those microorganisms, whether it's spores or vegetative cells, and how these vegetative cells, if they are present in a black pepper, which cannot be treated by using heat, because normally black pepper, if you treat it with the very high temperature, what will happen is it will just cause it will lose its flavor, and it will lose all its all sensory properties. So here, when we use this black pepper to treat it only with airborne acoustics, what we find is we are able to achieve up to 1 to 2 log reductions, but that too extended treatment time. If you can see 0, 30, 60, and 90 minutes, we are able to achieve up to from, it's gone from 7.5 all the way to 5, almost 2 log. That is 99% reduction in vegetative cells were observed when it comes to black pepper. And similar reduction we also obtained in tapioca starch. And mind it, it was really challenging to use airborne acoustic with the tapioca starch because of sound pressures. It was just exploding and it was just moving around the chamber. So that was some design issue, but we changed the design so that we do not have that effect. So this is one of the technique how we can get desired microbial inactivation in dried food ingredients and leading to better safety of the product. Now, if you see the treatment time over here, 30 minutes or 90 minutes, or here 30 minutes, we are able to achieve 1 log reduction. But we are further able to reduce this time when we combine this with any other source, maybe with the plasma or with any other source. Here, the good example here is when if you see whether it's peanuts, whether it's any of those plantation crops, pepper or clove or any of those ingredients, when they're harvested at a physiological maturity. That is a moisture between 18 to 25%. And then it has to be either it's a sun dried or it is dried at a low temperature of 40 degrees or so to bring it to the safe moisture level of 12 to 14%. And then in this particular case, if we use that drying in presence of this airborne acoustic, because it is also having a drying effect, what we can do is we can dry off the ingredient, plus we can also have a microbial inactivation without having any changes in their key properties. For example, when we use a contact and non-contact, by non-contact or contact, I mean here is when these peppers were kept on this radiating plate. That was a contact. And non-contact when we use it in this particular setup here. So we did not see any degradation of phenolic content of the black pepper, because that's mainly one of the key properties which leads to differences. And this was adjusted to the moisture level because we did observe drying effect. Because even the peppers which were used for this purpose, as far as I remember, was having around 13% moisture. And after the treatment, it reduced the moisture content to 11%. That means 2 to 3% reduction in the moisture was observed at 30 minutes. But there's no changes in the phenolic content. Similarly, when we use it for the starch, and the starch is mainly used for rheological purpose for starch mixes as well as in different food formulation. And we did not see any change in the pasting profile of the starch. So this clearly shows how we can use airborne acoustic, which was used in industry only for defoaming application. We can use it for non-contact microbial inactivation. So over here again, when it comes to spores, this was one of the challenge. We could not inactivate those spores by using this particular technique. Whether it's an indirect contact or direct contact, we did not see a significant reduction. The main reduction what we can observe was only like half a log, that is around 50 to 60% reduction in spore counts. But at least for vegetative cells, which is quite interesting and good for spices and condiments, because we do talk a lot about 3 log, 2 log, and most of the processes, if they're able to achieve 99% reduction in microorganisms, that is good enough. Because when we say 5 log reduction or a 5 log population is very high. But it is assumed if any technology can achieve 5 log, it will be able to achieve 2 logs, which is a normal microbial count, which is found in most of the contaminated food. Because if we have any product with the 5 log as a starting material, and it will spoil within a day or so. So that's normally we do not find that high population in any of the product. Even in the fish, which is harvested freshly, max to max what we have seen is 2 log or 3 log. But if we leave it in normal condition, within a day, it crosses 4 log. So that is not fit for further processing. So there are a number of different checkpoints, but we call it in other ways HACCP, that is hazard analysis and critical control point. So what is the raw material required, log population, how we can use it. So this particular technique can be inserted in a process line depending upon what is the microbial load required for the to achieve. Now, when it comes to inactivation mechanism, and again, if you see here, control cells, this is Bacillus cells, Bacillus subtilis cells. And then when we treat it, it is just disruption of those cells. So that means cell fragmented and the physiological nature of the cell altered. So this was what was observed in this case. Whereas inactivation mechanism, when it is concerned with these particular airborne acoustic, is not fully understood, and still we are trying to establish at this stage. And whereas when, if you remember, when we were talking about probe-based system or contact type ultrasonics, we see the disruption based on these pores. Whereas when it comes to airborne acoustic, we can see the cell fragmentation and disruption of the cells because of airborne acoustics. Now, another application, as I mentioned, for biological application was related to biofilm inactivation. As you all know, what is a biofilm? The biofilm is just formation of bacterial growth of bacteria in such a way it leaves some of those EPS, that is extra polymeric substances, and again cell grows. So it is very difficult to inactivate biofilms. It's just because it just forms number of layers, and in order to inactivate those cells, even we can inactivate the cells, but for that the medium or the agent, whatever is used, whether it's a plasma or a chlorine or peracetic acid or any of those chemicals, has to penetrate into the biofilm. So in this case, what we see is biofilm creates a biggest challenge at the moment because of resistance coming in from antibiotics. And this biofilm work, what we have been carrying out, is not only related to food applications, but it is also related to medical application, especially MRSA and other elements. So how we can use this ultrasonics, and this was very high profile project funded by Science Foundation Ireland, which is still ongoing. And we try to employ airborne acoustics or ultrasound to dislodge the films and to use either chlorine, peracetic acid, or your plasma or ozone to inactivate those cells, and then to see how the structure of the film is changing. So in order to do that, this particular project, you can easily find it online as well about it on ultrafilm. So here we use both airborne acoustic and ultrasonic bath system. Now, ultrasonic bath system, how it is practical for biofilm, as you can see, we also try to see if we are able to dislodge a film from the steel coupon or different type of surfaces, and then to see the washing effect. That means films are eradicated, brought into the suspension, and then we can use any medium to eradicate those. So, and you can see clearly here, when we use E. coli to make a biofilm of 96 hours with cold plasma alone, like control and controlled ultrasound for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, plasma 3 minutes, plasma 5 minutes, and the combination of it. So what you can see is there was a dislodgement of the films. Controlled biofilm was controlled biofilm, what you can see over here, something like this, very dense. After airborne acoustics, we see the dislodgement of the films. And then if we use only plasma, we had some of those inactivation, but film was still intact. But when we combine these two together, but what I'll carry on with this particular study, when we have some clarity what a plasma is, how we can use it, and different properties in afternoon session. So it was able to affect the viability of biofilm and architecture of the biofilm, the way biofilms are are designed. For example, over here, as you can see over here, this is the typical image of biofilm. These are the cells, and these are EPS, that is extra polymeric substances, which are released from the cell. And because of that, it becomes very difficult to inactivate or kill these cells. And now, as you can see, reduction in biofilm biomass under control with ultrasound and with the cold plasma. So we can see clearly, and with the different treatment conditions, we will able to see the reduction in metabolic activity of these bacterial cells, either to generate EPS or to multiply further. So I'm not going into the details of metabolic activity, and it was done in a similar fashion what I showed you for ultrasonics, and that's that's the part. And if we go further, the next application of ultrasonics was all related to extraction, biotransformation, and value addition. So there's a big team of people, they're working on different applications here. And if you see the equipment over here, the ScienceMed, what I just showed you in the previous slide, where we have supercritical fluid extraction system and attached ultrasonic probe on top. And these are the different bath system, and these are different ultrasound which is attached with the probe from the top. So there are different configurations, and currently we have around 14 different types of ultrasonic systems, and 4 of them are combined with different techniques. So these combinations were done mainly for making specific applications and for specific applications and our objective. So main application related to extraction was related to biotransformation. That means converting whole of the biomass, that is macroalgae or microalgae, into value-added product, or to add value to food processing, waste stream or product streams. Now, so if you see this particular diagram again of bioeconomy, so where we use ultrasonic for biorefinery approach, that means the term this biorefinery, I'm mentioning it for the first time, is mainly taken, the best example was biorefinery of crude oil, from where we get plastic, diesel, petrol, kerosene, and different types of oil from just the crude oil. Same approach for any given biomass. For example, here, this is macroalgae, seaweeds. How we can get proteins, carbohydrates, phenolics, pigments for different application, or else whatever leftover biomass for bioenergy. This is a typical example of unlocking the potential of seas and ocean and using better what we already use, that is making use of waste. So the purpose how we can use ultrasonic for biorefinery is to develop a resource efficient approach for sustainable production of various ingredients for food, feed, and other sectors, and technology that increases resource efficiency, reduces energy consumption, decreases the solvent use, and increase yield of the product. When tomorrow or day after tomorrow, when we start talking about clean and green extraction technologies, pre-treatment or waste valorization, there we'll go through the concept how we bring ultrasonic as a cleaner approach. That will be dealt in detail. But it is difficult to segregate technology with different process, because our core objective is to develop a disruptive technology approach. So you may see some of the examples coming here and there. So if you take about extraction systems, I'm just trying to quote some of those examples which are live at the moment, which is ongoing. So whether any of those seaweeds, whether it's Laminaria digitata, Laminaria hyperbolea, Ascophyllum nodosum, Saccharina latissima, and all these seaweeds are used to produce different types of hydrocolloids or as an alternative protein source. Europe and America and most of the countries, they started looking this one as a new biological resources for alternative sources of protein or alternative source of biomass, because their growth does not require any of those input. They just grow on their own in a sea. So how we can use clean and green extraction technologies, although we can use the chemicals, but if we try to utilize any of the new biological resources, it is very important to start with something which itself is established for a cleaner approach and to obtain different fractions. And then to look for different application, that means having application and purifications. And when it comes to cleaner and greener extraction techniques, and these are some of the approaches what has been used again for cavitation, supercritical plus ultrasound, microwave plus ultrasound assisted, and then again pulse electric field. And these are some of the techniques what we will be covering in the processes when we go through a zero waste approach and conversion of waste to value. And this is not the part as of now. I'm going to go into great detail here. Again, if you take as a new biomass as a macroalgae, ultrasonics used for ultrasound assisted drying for improving the drying efficiency, used ultrasound for pretreatment for extraction to obtain value added product, and then seaweed and different extraction to obtain various ingredients. So this will be very well be clear when we go through biorefinery approach and zero waste. That's the part of, I think, day 3 afternoon or day 4. So just you have to remember what is going to come forward in next 1 or 2 days. Now coming back to mainly to ultrasonic assisted extraction. Now here, if you look for any normal extraction, if suppose you want to extract water-soluble phenolics from any biomass, carrot, spinach or anything, what we do is we have a solvent, that's for instance water, methanol or ethanol, added to the raw material, left it overnight for 24 hours, and then we measure its content, and it takes the curve something like this, right? And this is mainly for fucose. This is a very important sugar which is present in a seaweed, and I presented a classical example here. And then this is a normal extraction route, what it takes place. And the maximum recovery is decided based on when there's no significant changes in the recovery. Now, when we use it for normal control systems, we can see the maximum recovery, whatever is obtained over here, to a level at this point after 22 hours. Whereas when we give ultrasonic treatment of just 10 minutes to the biomass, what we see is recovery itself nearly about 90 milligram per gram is obtained within an hour after 1 hour of pre-treatment. Yeah, so that means we are saving almost nearly about 20 hours time here. Now, another advantage, not only by saving a time by giving 10 minutes treatment, another advantage what we observe here is if we are leaving it for prolonged extraction time, it also leads to oxidation of key compound because it is stirring, it is rotating. And then what was carried out was once we have this extraction kinetics, that means extraction at different time point, and this is the ultrasonic intensity which was used. We can fit in the Pellet model. This is one of the most easiest model to fit, because in my opinion, when we fit any of those curves with any of the equation, simplest model is the best model. And here at concentration at any given time t for target compound, concentration at time t is 0. Obviously nothing is extracted in the beginning. And then capacity constant. And based on that, K1 and K2 parameters can be obtained. And we can see here, when we used ultrasonic at different power levels, we had a significant increase in extraction, and it was able to recover more compared to control itself. So this clearly shows how ultrasound, by disrupting a matrix, it can improve the extraction efficacy. And the experimental setup is quite straightforward, and it can be used for a range of different matrices, whether it's a meat, fish, poultry, plant, or macroalgae or microalgae. It's a probe system, having it in a normal beaker setup, and then just adding a sample and the different solid to liquid ratio. One thing very important when it comes to extraction is we can add large amount of solvent. Normally in a literature, if you try to find what is the best solvent ratio to the solid, is 1:50. More and more water we add, or more and more solvent we add, will have a better extraction efficiency. But here is the catch. If you add too much of solvent, then you have to remove that solvent in order to recover your target compound. So that balance, how do you establish that balance? One, either way is to optimize that, what is the best ratio in normal condition, and then to employ ultrasonics on it. B step is to see what is the content of that. Say, for example, if you're trying to extract extract phenolics, which is water soluble, if you know the solubility, maximum solubility of that phenolic is suppose 1%. So accordingly, if you know it, the biomass contains 10 grams of phenolic per 10 grams per 100 grams of raw material. So you have to make sure that you add that much amount of solvent, which is able to solubilize everything. It is something like 1% of sugar can be dissolved easily in 1 gram of sugar can be dissolved in 100 ml of water very easily. So if we have 20 grams of sugar, adding 100 ml of water will not solubilize unless until you employ heat to it. So in that way, you have to come up with an exact ratio, because just looking into the literature saying that somebody used 1:25, so I'll also use the same ratio, but that has to be on the same matrix. If matrix is different, composition is different, you have to optimize that particular ratio. So that's another important critical aspect when it comes to ultrasound assisted extraction. Otherwise, you will not be able to observe what you were expecting to obtain. Now, this gives you another example how fucose, that is fucose sulfated polysaccharides, is one of the most important polysaccharide at the moment, which is obtained from certain macroalgae. Here, if you see, when I report here 20%, 50%, 100% sonication amplitude, that means 100% was corresponding to 38 watt per centimeter square. Now, you can see it's again only 2 and 5 minutes. So that means how we can make it in a continuous process. Now, when it was used with ultrasound alone, we see an increase in extraction yield. Whereas when we use microwave power, what we saw was there was a 9-fold increase when we used when we used microwave. Now, we were able to use microwave power for this particular compound because these are not temperature sensitive. Conventional extraction process for fucoidins out of seaweed is to use at least 1% of hydrochloric acid, boiling it at 80 degrees for at least 6 hours to recover that compound. So, sorry, I just need to go back. So what we see when we use ultrasonics, whatever we obtained from there, we had a 9-fold increase when we used only microwave. But when we combine both microwave and ultrasound together, as you can see here, is microwave 20% power level, 50% and 100% with different microwave power. When these were combined together, we had almost 18-fold increase from ultrasound alone, or 2-fold increase from microwave alone. So this clearly shows how we can combine the technologies to have increase in yield. But remember again, this is only applicable for a specific compound which was not temperature sensitive. The similar approach cannot be used when we try to use it for temperature sensitive compound which starts degrading at 30 degrees or 40 degrees Celsius, because this compound is very difficult to extract from matrix. Now, if you look at the next here, this is example from coffee silver skin. So we just wanted to see how the SEM images changes when we go for use ultrasonic, microwave, and combination of that. This is a raw coffee silver skin, and this coffee silver skin is basically when the main purpose of this particular work was a very specific PhD was carried out by one of our Chinese PhD student was based on fair trade. The coffee beans are obtained from Africa, and they are roasted in roasted grains are obtained from Africa, and they're converted are sold to a lot of different companies, Starbucks and different places. So coffee silver skin is something like what we get red color testa on top of peanuts. So that coffee silver skin is having a huge environmental issue, and how do we use them, or how do we get rid of them? So we found that as very good source of proteins, as well as good source of caffeine as a bioactive, plus fibers, and they were used, and we have also used those ones using a technology as a replacement for phosphates in a meat. That's completely different story altogether. Here, coming back to main question here, when you see the raw coffee silver skin, how the surface looks like. When we use a microwave, it shows how disruption takes place. With ultrasound, how the disruption is happening. When we use ultrasound and followed by microwave, this what was happening to the matrix. Microwave plus ultrasound, that means microwave followed by ultrasound, this is what was happening. And when we use simultaneous ultrasound and microwave, we see complete dislodgement. So that is the main issue here. If we have a solvent, in the case of raw silver skin, it will take a lot of time for solvent to go in, dissolve the target compound and recover. So that's why it takes longer time for extraction. Whereas when we employ that solvent along with these technologies, since the matrix is disrupted and the surface biomass is enhanced, then we are able to have a better recovery. So I know I'm just going over time, and what you can do is we can continue this particular thing with different extraction of hydrocolloids in afternoon, and then we'll have some more applications. Then we'll switch over to the plasma. So with this, I'll
question.
We'll stop, and I'll just pass it on to our organizer, and she'll have certain information for you. Sorry. Yeah. So far, whatever we have covered, do you have any questions? Between microwave followed by ultrasound and ultrasound followed. Yes. So the reason here is difference between microwave followed by ultrasound or ultrasound followed by microwave. That is basically the combination is basically when we give suppose a matrix is very hard matrix, and where temperature plays an important role to disrupt a matrix, especially in the case of seaweeds. Seaweeds are very tough matrix for extracting that particular compound. So in that case, we use high energy, that is microwave, and then to use ultrasonic to create further cavities and improving the mass transfer using ultrasound. Whereas when we use ultrasound first, is if suppose we want to use ultrasound with enzymes, because ultrasound can help in modulating enzyme or can operate at lower temperature, whereas microwave will inject higher level of temperature. So that's the combination is largely depends upon our target compound and type of matrix we use. So that's very, very important question. It's not just to use it for the sake of using microwave plus ultrasound. So I'll quote another example where we were using enzymes for extraction of proteins. So we used a protease enzyme along with the matrix and used ultrasonic for having at around 40 degrees Celsius. Optimum enzyme temperature was around 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. And we ran that ultrasonic system for at least an hour. And then any of those enzymatic operation has to be thermally treated to inactivate enzyme and then to do the downstream processing. In order to do that, instead of using heat alone, we used a microwave, and you would have seen from your own previous experience as well as previous education that microwave improves enzymatic inactivation at much faster rate compared to thermal. We were able to inactivate enzymes and was able to use microwave energy as a source also for downstream processing. We get the extract plus the biomass and then separated both of them together. So that's why the use of microwave followed by ultrasound, or ultrasound followed by microwave, or combination, that depends upon three factors. One is the type of matrix you're using. B, type of compound we are extracting. If you're using temperature sensitive compound, then you may not have to use microwave at all. And C, whether we want to do simultaneous extraction and purification or downstream processing together. I hope I answered your question. Can we use duckweed protein source enhancing protein content in milk by relating it to non-destructive technologies? Yes, of course we can, because one of the things is duckweed, when it is growing as, and actually you are exactly answering how we can complete the cycle itself. We can improve protein content of milk. First thing is the reason why we want to improve the protein content of milk. But yes, we can easily do it. But one thing you have to remember, when duckweed is growing in on a wastewater of a stream, it has to undergo through a regulation. That means wastewater is clear wastewater. It is not mixed up with floor cleaning water. This is one of the issue what I have seen in most of the processing plant over in India itself, where the wastewater which is coming out of a dairy processing plant is mixed with the chlorinated water or with the detergent which is also used for cleaning of non-processing area. So once that is there, we get chemical nitrogen or phosphorus into duckweed protein, and the duckweed can be dried and can be extracted. Proteins can be extracted as what you can see some other technology apart from ultrasound, what we'll mention in coming days. And then that protein itself is a good source either for animal feed or to add it into the milk. But there is one of the challenge when duckweed is growing. At the same time, there's some of the shellfish, the small crustaceans, they also grow with it. And because of those shellfish and crustaceans, we may have shellfish allergens in it. So that's another thing which we have to consider. And the third one is, can we use microenergy for free fatty acid reduction in oil? Now, this is basically, again, microwave energy itself can cause the formation of free fatty acids because it will have oxidative effect. And now, if you are extracting oil, for example, from soybean, and by giving a microwave treatment, remember, soybean also contains moisture, and it may lead to hydrolytic rancidity. So how we can use microenergy for free fatty acid reduction in oil? That will be a challenge, because as far as extraction is concerned, it induces some bit of lipid oxidation. And it's because of presence of water as well as presence of air within the matrix. The third one is, if I have to extract oil from leafy vegetable, how can I proceed for extraction directly as leafy vegetable, or making powder then to go for extraction? Now, so this is one of the very important aspect, to use dried ingredient or to use a fresh material for extraction. Technically, if we use a fresh material for extraction, then you're saving a lot of energy, because if it's a leafy vegetable, it's having around 80 to 90% moisture. You dry it and then you extract it. So that means extraction again here is after drying of matrix. So you're using a lot of energy there. But remember, if you have a leafy vegetable and extraction system very, very close to the source, you don't have to stabilization. In majority of the cases, drying step is included just to stabilize the raw material. This is one of the challenge of making use of waste. For example, if you have any leafy vegetable or any of the waste product, if you combine it together for 5 different locations and their life is very restricted, shelf life is there. So that's why drying is considered one of the steps where we can reduce the volume A, and B, you can stabilize the raw material. Whereas when it comes to direct extraction from leafy vegetable, yes, it is possible by using ultrasonic itself or hydrodynamic cavitation, what you'll see in next couple of slides. And then to give a slight hot treatment so that we can remove the oil fraction out of it. Now, another one, does vapor pressure of liquid sample affect cavitation? Yes, vapor pressure does affect, and that's the difference when it comes to manosonication, or whole of the cavitation itself is based on vapor pressure. The pressure within the bubbles or pressurized solvent will have different cavitation. So yes, it is. Any further question? Yeah, so thanks very much for interesting question. This is really good, and feel free to ask further more questions, and we'll be back at 2 o'clock. Yeah, we'll back at 2 o'clock. I'll continue with this ultrasonics and then with the plasma. I'll take a bit of time to go slow with all these technologies so that at least we'll be able to understand some of the stuff what we are presenting here. Thank you very much. So I'll see you at around 2 o'clock.